still muted? Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Third Thursday Talks. Today is Thursday, July 15th, and y'all hear Wednesday is still on my mind. We just had a major event on yesterday, and that event was centered and surrounded around gun violence here in our city. And last month, we began a conversation that we want to continue here on tonight. And the conversation that we began on last week, it was about youth and gun violence, and a pathway to peace. And we had some very prestigious guests who were on our panel last month. Attorney Stephen Hunter was with us. We had our former Congressman, the Honorable Kendrick Meek, who was on our panelists as well last month. And then we had Pastor Lorenzo Johnson, who's one of the community-based organizational leaders within the Anti-Violence, Gun Violence Initiative. And he was on the line with us. And then we had Dr. Shirley Planton, who has an organization and has authored books that speak about, gun violence and, the whole mindset. And so tonight we wanted to come back and we wanted to continue the conversation because in our coming together, we don't like to hold us long on a Thursday night. We want to keep you coming on back. Every time Third Thursday Talk shows up and you see the post and everything. We wanted to come back tonight and we wanted to continue the dialogue, but we wanted some other voices, some other voices to come on and to be a part of this dialogue. And tonight, I'm honored, I'm pleased to have persons on with us whom I respect, whom I work with, and two of these individuals that are here with us on tonight. I'm just glad that they could take time out of their very, very busy schedules and to come on and be with us tonight. And we're going to talk. I was going to say we'll dress kind of casual, but our first guest, who is my sister, so she might have some other things going on. She might not be very, very casual on tonight. And so, but in the conversation, we want to be. We want to talk on tonight and dialogue on tonight. And to our viewers who are on Facebook, we're able to see you and to hear your questions. And so you can type those in the comment section, and we'll catch your questions and we'll answer those and include those in our conversation. And then for those persons who are also on the webinar, you can put in the chat section your questions and maybe something that you want to suggest, and we can touch on that as well. But let me introduce to you our guests who really don't need major introduction. Listen, my sister, she's my sister, but officially, listen, she is Major Chiquita Thomas Butler. Listen, she is a native Miamian. She's a native Miamian, born and raised in the county of Dade, spent her younger years growing up in the Attapata area. She's a product of Miami-Dade County Public Schools. She holds a bachelor's. She has a master's of science. She's a 24-year veteran of the Miami Police Department. So sometimes, we get so common with people and we don't get a chance to know all of the labor that they put in to be where they're at. But listen, this is an accomplished sister. She's a major at the city of Miami. First African American woman, watch this, to take in a supervise officer survival, this officer survival course, what have you. She's the first African American woman to command the area of Coconut Grove. Coconut Grove, you got to check this. Listen, that's prominent, y'all. She's currently assigned to the office of the chief as the community engagement director, where she is the first to hold this newly created position. Major Butler, my sister, tell the people hello here on tonight. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you so much. It is a privilege. It is an honor to be chatting with you tonight, my brother. I'm
Good.
looking forward to some good dialogue.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you so much. And listen, this guy, I'm gonna say he's a new brother to me. Um, we met getting ready to work on some other items, some other issues. Actually, I had as a part of the GVI, AVI GVI, I had an opportunity to sit in a training session that he did, and I was so impressed with him. I was so impressed with the staff. Um, Very articulate, very sharp, very knowledgeable brother. And I was, I was like, wow, okay, cool, man, I like this. I kind of knew of him from a distance. They say all of the circles here in Miami are small, and but we never really crossed paths until I was actually in that training session in which he and his team and staff led. And then as fate, if you want to say it. I don't want to get into anybody's religion. For me, God allowed for us to cross path and then work on a major event that took place on yesterday, this peace walk, which was pastor led, uniting with several CBOs, Mr. Jonathan Spikes. Listen, he is another South Florida native. He is a cancer survivor. Listen, a lot of people don't know that he's a cancer survivor, and so listen, we're rooting and cheering. Listen, God, and listen, God can use science, doctors. Listen, hey, he's still in the blessing business, and just to see this brother, that's inspiration for somebody who's out there listening to us tonight. And so we're not talking about cancer and health, but I just had to plug that in there because that's not a minor piece to overlook. He was reared in Liberty City. In fact, Scott Housing Projects in our city. And so those of us that were born and raised in the county of Dade, we know how major that is. And where he was born and raised, that did not prevent this brother from excelling. He went on and went to school, a graduate from Lamar University. He has a master's in education and clinical mental health counseling. Currently, he's working on his doctorate. He may be close to getting it. I don't know, but he's working through it, and we're going to be rooting for him and celebrating with him. But check this out. He's working to get that doctorate degree from the University of Southern California. So listen, it's not just some fly-by-night school. This is an accredited university, a major university that has a rich history, and the university itself brings a lot of credibility. And so for him to be matriculating to get his doctorate, that is awesome. 2011, he founded the Affirming Youth Foundation Incorporated. And this foundation, listen, they provide a multiplicity of services. Some of them social, supportive services, educational programs and services, prevention, therapeutic intervention, psychoeducational sessions to children. And listen, he is a great planner. He pushed me in areas. He pushed me hard. He pushed me very, very, very hard, broadened my scope to a lot of things. And man, listen, this brother helped me look good on yesterday. And I'm looking forward to not only tonight, but I'm looking forward to future works, because what we did on yesterday, we're trying to take this to various areas of Miami-Dade County. Miami Gardens, look out, we coming. Down south, look out, we coming. Central Dade, we coming back. South, get ready, we coming back. We sending a message to let you know that the faith community, CBOs, law enforcement, political agencies, listen, we are saying no. We want to change, transform our communities, and this brother played a major, major, major role. Mr. Jonathan Spike, say hello to our people here on tonight.
Good evening. I appreciate you for having me here. It's an honor to be here with you today and all the wonderful work that you're doing. And Major Butler, I appreciate hearing your story. Oh my God, a first in everything. So you are Black history. You
Absolutely,
really are Black history.
absolutely,
Congrats.
absolutely. And so, listen, we're grateful tonight. We want to dive into this conversation. We last week, we had a chance to begin a conversation about gun violence, and I'm one of those persons. Listen, I must admit that there are times where people in our community, they are very knee jerk in their reaction and their reactions. But the people that we had in our last panel and then our guests here on tonight, they're not knee jerk reaction people. They're doing this work 24/7. They're involved. They're not just jumping up doing something after a shooting. They're being proactive and not reactive. And so tonight we want to dialogue. We could talk ad nauseum about what we feel are the ills, and I'm going to allow our panelists to kind of just touch on that. But we want to just touch on that briefly. But I really want to see if we can really dive into you know, what are some of the solutions? But let's just Major Butler. I mean, you could touch on some of the things that you've seen that you feel are the issues, and then we'll come back. And Jonathan, you could talk about some of the things that you feel are the issues. But then, let's not just be a conversation on tonight about issues, because again, we could talk ad nauseum about it. It's been done. It's been done. People, we talk about it. We talk about it. But however, let's start kicking out some ideas as to what we think could be the solutions. So, Major Butler, if you would, share with us what you think like some of the issues are, and then Jonathan, you could jump right on in after Major Butler.
Well, I know a lot of times people like to harp on the law. We need another law for this, another law for that. And in reality, in my opinion, we really don't need any more laws. We really need to enforce the laws that we have on the books. We need to hold people accountable. Um, a lot of times, these young people, they get out there and they do things because and it's deeper than that. It really is. I have to start out by saying that a lot of it is deeper than that. It's the family life, it's the parents, is the villages are not there. But when it does happen, we have to hold people accountable. And we don't need other laws to do that. We just need to enforce the laws that are there. And even with programs, in my opinion, we have a multitude of programs. I don't think it's that we don't have programs or have people out there putting things in place. In my opinion, it's more about consistency of those programs. You have to be consistent. That's in everything we do. When I've dealt with children that get in trouble, especially when I was in another position at work, I like to follow them. Sometimes they get into trouble. We think we get them out, and we never follow up. Follow through is extremely important. And I would say, starting off the conversation for me, those would be the first things I would like for us to think about: consistency in programs. We don't need to make up any other laws. We just need to talk to our people in place about enforcing the laws once these people are caught doing what they were doing, and follow through. Follow through. That means from the family unit all the way through to if they're in school, because there are already programs in place for those things.
Awesome, 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 my sister. And we're going to talk, and as you stated, let's talk about some solutions, and then as you already hinted at, consistency. You've already hinted at enforcing the laws that already exist, that are already on the docket. And so, listen, we're going to talk about that on tonight. Jonathan, share with us, briefly about, we want to talk, briefly about the issues, but then we want to dive right into what we believe some of the solutions are.
I appreciate the things that you said, Major Butler, especially as it relates to we cannot criminalize our way out of this social ill. These problems have been existing and they're part of a structure of racism, economic, depriving people of economics, housing insecurity, lack of health care, lack of living minimum wages. All of these things are contributing factors that allow gun violence and gang violence to flourish. And so, if we want to be prescriptive, oftentimes we are too prescriptive in saying if we just do this, then it should work that. But anytime you change anything in the system, it's called the law of unintended consequences. You're going to cause a reaction in another piece of the system. That's why you used to hear people say, recently we used to hear people say, throw the whole system away. No, we know what this system is already doing. So we just need to make incremental steps in changing it so it could be more beneficial to the stakeholders, to the end users of that system.
Oh man, listen. So to all our viewers, you can see. Listen, we have two very talented, sharp people here on tonight, and so policies, present policies, laws that are in place. Do we need more? Do we need more policies? Do we need is it more policing? You know, what are your thoughts on that as far as those who would say we need more laws on the docket? Um, we need more policing. We've heard in some governmental circles from the federal level. um, we're not going to get into whether people are Democrat or Republican here on tonight, but we've heard that even before the election, we heard, the defunding of the police. Then we hear now that federally, right now, that President Biden is not pro defunding, which is not my point, which is not my argument. He's not pro defunding, but in fact, there are talks about him supplying more federal funding for policing. And so, it is more policing the resolution. What about the policies that are on docket? Jonathan, we start off with Major Butler. You want to jump in there and talk on that, and then Major, we want to hear your take on that.
I believe the question that you're asking is very interesting because we could look at it one or two ways. When you say more policing, what type of policing are you talking about? Are you talking about law and order, or you're talking about police officers who may also be social workers and they're going to do more of those social needs and opportunities, provisions to the people within the community that could play football with the kids like they used to do when I was coming up? And working within those apartment complexes or housing complexes where a lot of these crimes are occurring. So it's can be, may be more policing, but then we have to define what that really means.
Oh, that's good. Major Butler.
Yeah, I listen. I was holding myself in my seat because I wanted to jump in. I totally agree with that because here's the thing. I started out earlier by saying we don't really need any more laws. We need to enforce the laws that's on the book. More importantly, when it comes to the policies and the addition of more police, I totally agree with what Jonathan just said. It depends on where those police are going to be allocated and what resources, what are they going to be doing. We already know that there is a deficiency as it pertains to police, how they deal with mentally ill people, right? And we know that there is an area there of concern when the police department has to be called because we're not social workers like that. We are not psychologists. We don't deal with mentally ill people on a regular basis. So are those allocations going to be to fund an area like that in the police department? Because I think that we can, all three of us can agree, and I'm sure those that are listening can agree that police work does need some reform. It needs some reform. And so we're not going to pity pat around with that and say that it's perfect because it is not perfect at all. And if that's where the funds are going to be allocated, then we good. If not, we don't need it. We don't need any more officers policing heavily in communities. We don't need that. We got enough of that.
Yes.
we try to tone that down. So
Yes.
Jonathan, I'm telling you, you hit the nail on the head, my brother.
Yes.
Yeah, and with those social, yeah, because all of that is social factors that you were
Social
speaking about,
factors.
and the level of education. If the money's not going to be allocated in the police departments towards those type of initiatives or resources that they're going to be able to give back to the community, it's going to be useless. And
And
departments have to have a plan for that, you know.
right. And I like, if I may, Reverend Barber, I like the fact that you said education, because we look at the outcomes. We never look at the inputs that go into the system that creates these disparities in arrest and education level. If a child is growing up in a home and the parents were not educated from the 60s or even 70s, because either they had to work, living in poverty situations, they had to work and prepare and provide for their families, then most likely that the children that they bring into the world may also have education deficiencies. And so that's two generations. And then those children have children. Now that becomes three generations. And then we would sit back and say, well, the parents are not reading to the children in the home. Well, do we even know if the parent can read?
Great point.
So we can't look at just the child. We have to really go back and examine all of the generations and the systems that go along with producing the type of children that we will say is having problems or having issues and challenges in their life. There's a lot more that goes into it.
So then policing, but the type of policing is critical, or one of the critical ingredients into creating this um, pathway to peace, uh,
Absolutely critical.
whether it be you know police in the park, police that are inside of these residences that are problematic, perhaps areas, interacting with young people, teaching, playing football with them, and things of that nature. That type of policing and having those type of officers are critical. What are some other ways, as it pertains, maybe Major Butler, you're good in this area, to identify the type of policing, additional policing, not just this law and order, like Jonathan had mentioned. Hey, is it law and order, or what? So what are some of the other ways? Because a lot of those viewing, and who will talk to others, and those who will come on and look later on, because these things get archived and people play and watch them over and over again. What are some of the type of policing that people are unaware of? Because most people think police, they think cars, they think uniform, they think gun, they think bulletproof vest. They're thinking they're going to come in and probably have us like we're in some type of military confinement if you talk about adding more policing, and so they become anti it. But there are other types of policing, as Jonathan began to hint at. If you could share on that with us.
Yeah, so we have different resources that come along with policing. We have advocates. One of the things I'm hoping that we do add though is counseling. Um, because when you in counseling for the mentally ill, I'm big on that. We have a large amount of homeless individuals in the city of Miami, and that's one of the areas that I think that we lack at, and I'm hoping that we can expand on that at some point. But advocacy, we also have our community relations unit, and they also work in the community, especially with our kids by way of our PAL, our Police Athletic League. And then we also have our Do the Right Thing program. So we have a multitude of things that direct our attention towards our children that don't require us to just be policing the children. But at the end of the day, we are police officers.
Mhm.
And one of our main jobs is to enforce the law. So we still have to keep it in perspective. And I'm not saying enforce the law and forget about everything else, but I think sometimes people forget that, and they expect us to be other than that, when in reality, that's what, when everybody comes out of the academy, that's what they're trained to do, enforce the law. We don't train them how to be a pal officer or a guy that's going to work with the kids. You know, we don't train them for that. Everybody that comes out, they go to the academy, and their job is to enforce the law. So, you know, there's other types of policing, but I think that we can have other, I think we can add to that. There needs to be layers to it.
And so that whole sensitivity training too on the
Yeah.
side of officers is key and critical. Um, I believe the relationships, between the community and law enforcement over the years has deteriorated. Jonathan had made mention about, hey, when he was young, you know, you know, officer friendly, you know, what's the dog name, Mr. McGruff or something like that.
Mr. McCray.
So they had those type of things, and of course, all of us, we're removed from elementary school for whatever the period of time. We don't want to say for how long, but we've been removed, and so we may not be familiar if those type of interactions are still there. And so when you hear, for those that are listening to us, when you hear that there's more funding as far as anti-violence, gun violence, and there's more funding for policing, the question becomes, as Jonathan asks, and as Major Butler, inserted here on tonight, that what type of policing becomes the question. These are questions that we can ask, our chiefs, who can ask those that are in charge. Okay, you get these dollars. What type of policing are we talking about? Because you could turn the heat up and the intensity up on an area where there's already a gigantic gulf, where people just don't trust law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. But building, amenable relationship, where you could talk to law enforcement, something goes on, hey, this is what's happening, or whatever the case may be. Those type of relationships, I think, are key and critical that we're missing out on, and getting the police officer back into the neighborhood, into the community, is it's very key and critical. We had a question that came up on Facebook, and one of the questions that came up on Facebook was how can we take and we make this plain? It says, how do we make it plain? How do we do messaging so that all could understand? So that question, it seems a little bit vague, but maybe I believe it came to us while we're in the context of talking about policing. And so how do we, I'm assuming that question, and the person that sent us that question, if we don't hit on it quite accurately, please let us know. How do we make the messaging as far as more policing plain? How can we make that plain? How can we make that messaging where people can understand? I'm gonna couch that question, since we were talking within this context. And so, Jonathan, Major Butler, whoever wanted to try to jump in, I'm trying to help the question. I don't want to. I don't want people to not ask questions and feel like, oh, I asked the question and they're saying.
I think I get the gist of what they're saying. I guess this is not a plain issue because it's so multi-layered. It's a very complex problem or situation that we have on our hands, and it involves multiple layers. So we're even trying to figure out how to simplify the language so people can understand this is what's needed, along with this, along with this, and along with this. It takes education. The education system is the major system that our kids are a part of. And if children can't read by the third grade, then we already know their life outcomes. They have adverse life outcomes. And so how then in Liberty City, when they used to grade the schools, why were the majority, if not all of the schools, were deemed to be failing? They had 17 schools within that in the Educational Transformation Office that were deemed to be failing, and the majority of them was located within Liberty City. So then you have to ask yourself, well, if all of these schools are failing, there has to be multiple other factors that are coming into play with this. Because if the schools are failing, then the kids can't read, they're not reading on grade level, and it's the school to prison pipeline. Yes. So where do we need to intervene? There are several other factors that we need to intervene with. Like I spoke before, we also have to intervene with the parents. We also have to intervene with the policies that are created that hold these systems in place.
So then the question, the author of the question basically sent back saying to me that we were talking about education, and Jonathan, you took us there without even knowing. So he said we were talking about education. You talked about the parents. You talked about the kids. So you brought up if schools are failing, then the kids are failing. So which also, so Major Bill, I want you to chime into this piece
But
as well.
can I, if I may?
Go ahead.
But then the bigger question becomes, why is the school failing? And we tend to put the onus, like I said before, on the outcome of the children when there is a system that is the one that's failing the kids.
Listen, absolutely. Listen, it's always I always feel that it's greater than what we readily run to. We take the lazy way out. And taking the lazy way out, it says, okay, this is an F school, this is a D school. Oh, it's Liberty City. And oh, it's always been that way. That's the easy and the lazy way. But when you begin to peel back all of these other layers and begin to look at, you know, what governmental resources are being poured into those areas. I mean, we were not scheduled to get on talking about schools, but I think it's all a part of when we talk about how do we get on the pathway to peace. You're talking about youth and gun violence. So then, how do we get these youth or those youth who are active in these nefarious activities? How do we deter them from that? Um, we're saying, listen, if they're excited about school, if they're in class and um, they're not readily reclined to defeat and saying, I can't learn how to do math, or I can't learn science, or I don't know biology, and I can't retain what they're talking about as far as history is concerned. If they're not ready to just check out of school and then be embraced by the streets, if they're like in love with school and excelling in school and excited about school, that I do believe that is a key ingredient as you're talking about the pathway to peace. And so, what resources are being invested in our schools, inner city schools? Do we have the best teachers? Do we have the best principals? What is being taught? Do are these teachers and people? And I'm not teachers. Please don't think Pastor Barber is anti-teacher. I have a daughter who has just graduated. I'm trying to get her into the school system, but these children. That's a conversation that we'll do offline at another time. Um, but listen, no, I mean, we really have to engage and look at that as we look at all of the determinants, the social determinants, educational determinants, economical determinants that feed into factor into why the inner city and why is it the inner city kids and the inner city schools, inner city homes, the inner city streets. I even look at the agriculture in the inner city. How many palm trees? How many palm trees you see riding down 17th Avenue, Tutu Ave? Come on, I mean, talk to me. I'm just major brother. Come on, man. I get upset. I mean, I have to go to the city every day. My church is in the city, and when I leave from up north, when I go and visit my friends who live in the suburbs, and I look at how the suburbs look versus how the inner city looks, and my goodness, it looks like even the grass struggles to survive in the inner city. I think all of it is interconnected. Major Butler.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Sometimes I've seen it myself. And that's why when we talk about policing and I say, um, they look for us to do a lot of things that we're really not qualified, so to speak, to do. We do so much. Like you just brought that up. There's times when our training unit will go out and they see a house or a person that is in dire straits and they take their training recruits out, clean up their yard, paint the house as a way to teach the young officers that we have to give back to the community. We have to be a part of the community that we are serving. And when you talk about the schools, we do so many different activities in the schools. Oh my gosh, we are always in the schools, talking with the students, because we want to relate to them that they do not have to be a product of their environment. And maybe at this moment, this is all that their parents can afford to give to them, but it does not have to be the end result. They don't have to stay that way. And there's been times, even when I was a commander in the Grove, and I would bump into families that were like that, and we would try to get them every piece of help that they can get for the resources that the county or the city had for them, to try to propel them in the right direction, especially if they wanted it. Because it's one thing for people to want it, and it's another thing for people to just be settled in what they're in and they don't want to do better. But if you find somebody that wants to do better, all they need sometimes is guidance. They need you to give them the information, help them to get to the resources that they need. And although police, that's our job to enforce the law, we have found so many other ways to get into the community. Our chief now, Chief Acevedo, one of his main things that he talks about often is relational policing. Because in relational policing, if you think about it, every transaction that you make, and when I say transaction, I mean when you come in contact with anybody, whether it be a teenager, an elderly person, a middle-aged person, a professional that's walking around a three-piece suit, it doesn't matter. Whatever the contact is, you need to make it relational. And at the end of it, there should be some positivity. Even if you have to take someone to jail, you can still do it with dignity and talk to that person en route to how, and talk to them on how we can better this situation, how they can come up out of this situation. So his thing is, we need every contact to be relational, where there's a positive outcome in some way if we can do that out of that contact.
Awesome. Now, listen, I'm going to challenge you because both of you, because listen, the Second Amendment talks about the right to bear arms. And so we have a lot of young people under the age limit who have access. When we talk about youth and gun violence, it's somewhat of an oxymoron of a statement, wherein there are laws in place that would suggest that these young people should not have guns, but nevertheless they do. And so, let's talk about policies perhaps that need to be changed, don't need to be changed. You have one of the major organizations, the NRA, who's a major player in United States government as far as their investments in various candidates and things of that nature. But the age limit, you got the mental capacity. Let's talk about that because we our time is wrapping, but I really want to deal with that piece because guess what? People saying, how do these young kids get the guns? How do they get the guns? There need to be new laws that keep young people from getting guns. Well, they're not supposed to have them in the first place.
Well, if I may take it and take this piece, one of the things that we tend to do when we have shootings in the neighborhoods is we blame the boys, the men and the boys in the community who did the shooting. But there's a manufacturer of the bullet and the manufacturer of the gun, and they are the least likely person to be blamed in this, although they are the agent of the death. Every year you have an increase in gun sales, like we did pre-COVID, well, when COVID first happened in 2020. The next year, this is research shows this, that you have an increase in homicides and gun violence. So it's not something that just fall out the sky and we're like, oh my God, why is this happening? The research is already telling us why it's happening. And bullets didn't used to be the way they are now, hollow points and things like that. The US military cannot use these bullets in an act of war because it's considered to be inhumane. Yet they could sell these bullets to us to kill each other. And the reason they could do it because it's not happening in their neighborhoods. It's happening in inner city neighborhoods. So the increase in the lethality of bullets is the main culprit. The increase of guns being more deadlier than before is the main culprit. But they are the ones that get the least amount of blame. We always come back and say the boys in the streets, and if it wasn't for them hanging around the corner, they are the cause of this. No, the manufacturers of the bullets and the guns and the companies that make these bullets and the guns and the company, and we support some of the products that they make are part of the reason that this is allowed to fester and go on.
Major Butler, you want to add to that?
So I have a different take on it. I'm a proponent of having my weapon. I have multiple weapons, let's be clear. Yeah, they fit in all purses. I'm a firearms instructor. I believe in the right to bear arms responsibly. Responsibly. Because there's a difference. I believe that most of this responsibility falls on the sellers of the gun.
Okay.
I believe that people need to be evaluated better. I believe that people need to make sure that mental health capacity is up to par. I believe that they need to not make it, it's almost easier for a person to go to a gun show and buy a gun than for me as a police officer to get a gun.
Wow.
You know, you have maybe the girlfriend that goes buys the gun at the gun show, and then they turn the gun over to the boyfriend that goes out there and does. I just think that there needs to be something in place. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I got that plan all together. I don't have that plan all together. But I do believe that there is a problem there where people can just go to a gun show and buy these weapons so easily. And I'm not a proponent of people on the street having assault rifles and things of that nature. So, Mr. Spike, I definitely agree with you on that when it comes to the type of weapons that people use to protect themselves. I don't need to walk around with an AK to protect myself and my family. I don't need to do that. And I just think that those type of weapons get into the wrong hands. We are not walking around in a war zone. So
Right.
people don't need to be able to go into a gun show, in my opinion, and buy those type of weapons or those type of rounds of ammunition. So that's my take on that. But I do believe, yeah, you should have the right to bear arms responsibly. If you fit the mental capacity, and I know there's like a little clause that says if they've been found incompetent or mentally unstable through a court. Now we know some people that they was mentally unstable, and the court has not caught it yet. So they need to do an evaluation on those. I mean, we know some people that are like that, and you say to yourself, man, how did they get that weapon? But that's what it says. They would have had to be found mentally incapable or incompetent at that time. And I don't agree with that. I think they need an evaluation when they buy their weapon, or before they can get it.
Major. So I have a question, Major. Listen. So I go to gun store,
Mhm.
not to the gun show, but a gun store. I I go to buy a gun. I'm not examined. Are you suggesting that be now one thing um, I do own a weapon, um, but I paid for it or whatever the case may be, and I could not pick it up until a day or two later from the store. Right? Yeah, okay. I can't remember. It's been a couple of years now, but I had a waiting period. So that waiting period gave them opportunity to look at my background as far as arrest or whatever else they had to look at, which was not a worry for me. However, I was not examined in my current state
Mhm.
because there were no instances wherein I had to be evaluated. So let me ask you this, my question, setting all that to say, are you suggesting that in that 3-day waiting period, that if I want to purchase a weapon, that I should be evaluated, or there should be something that says that I should have some kind of evaluation done, mental evaluation?
So let me give the clause. These thoughts and views in no way are coming from the City of Miami Police Department. I have to give the clause. These are
Okay.
strictly the thoughts and views of Chiquita Butler.
But
I
not
think
Miami Police.
I think a doctor, some people need to be evaluated by a doctor. I just think when I see sometimes when we catch people that and some of them will have a conceal permit, you know, those people kill people too. I mean, the guns are not that the killers, it's the person that uses the gun. That's my opinion. I mean, the gun, if I lay my gun down on the table and lock it up or what have you, it's not doing anything to anybody unless it gets stolen or something like that. That's why I say responsibly, because there's different avenues to responsibly. If you're going to carry it, you need to put it in the proper place. You need to carry it with you. You need to lock it up where people can't get their hands on it. But yeah, I'm saying that people need to be looked at when they buy these weapons. It just seems too easy. 3 days. 3 days is not enough to me. That some of these people that buy these assault rifles, that's my opinion. I just don't think. I mean, they should question them at least. Why do you need an assault rifle? I mean, why? What are you gonna tote that? Why do you need that? I mean, are you a hunter? I mean, does the military give them to you for free? So to me, that should be a thought to ask. Like, you know, where you know, and if you have a person that buys multiple guns, because you have some people that collect weapons, you know, if you see after running them, because it should be somewhere in a database, you own 3 guns, 3 different types of guns. Why can't it say, okay, this person just recently bought a gun about a year ago, now they buying this type of gun? And maybe have a questionnaire. Why is it? Let's see if there's some flags that pop up. Because if you buying a gun that maybe is a gun for show, it will say that. But if not, it's like, why do you have multiple guns just to what? Keep them and mine is for safety, not to look at. Pastor, I'm sure you carry yours for safety. I know you've been through some things.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, that's my opinion, Mr. Spikes.
Okay, but again, if I may,
Yes.
because you made a statement, and a statement that guns don't kill people, the person kills the person. Well, if you look at it from a public health perspective, cigarettes had to be lit in order for the person to inhale the nicotine.
Mhm,
However, we regulated cigarettes.
mhm.
So because the cigarettes are the killer. So the guns and the bullets are also the killers. And if they can regulate cigarettes, if they can enforce us to wear seatbelts, they can also do these same practices as it relates to bullets and as it relates to guns.
I'm sorry.
I
When
don't
you
like, I
regulate
don't,
cigarettes, can you? I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean when you said regulate cigarettes.
well, we tax cigarettes
Oh,
heavily.
okay.
Yeah, you know, it used to be cool. Remember back in the
Okay.
day, I don't know, we don't go tell nobody age, but like they'll get Billy D. Williams back in the day, cool cigarettes. It was, and they market those to African American communities because you had to be cool. And if you smoke cool cigarettes, then it changed to Newports. Then it changed to something else. We regulated that through taxes.
Mhm.
Under you had to be a certain age in order to purchase cigarettes. Same thing with alcohol. You have to be a certain age. So we find ways through public health to regulate harmful commodities. We do it with everything except guns. You can't even sue a gun manufacturer.
Well, you have to be a certain age to buy a gun.
Uh, well, 16-year-olds can hunt. It all depends on where you live.
But they can't buy it.
Right.
The
Right. Somebody, but as you stated before, somebody else purchased it, and yeah,
yes.
but they can regulate it in a way that we don't have to infringe upon anyone's Second Amendment right, because this is an argument that's not going to be had by me anyway, because we already know is there, and they're not going to change it. However, we could look at it from a public health standpoint and begin to look at the causality of these deaths. And if you look at the causality, it's the bullet and the gun.
So are you suggesting that they stop making the bullet and the gun? Because I mean, even if we have a lower amount of bullets and guns out there, people still gonna find a way to get to. So I want to understand what you mean by it's the bullet in the gun.
Right. What I'm saying is they do not have to increase the lethality of bullets and guns like they
Okay,
have been
yes. Okay, that part. Now, I said earlier, I do
doing.
agree with that. That people should not have those type of ammunition. That's the
Right.
point. So I did
And
agree with that. I just feel that people have the right to have their weapons and carry them responsibly. Make sure that they're in the proper place, and that people should be evaluated because everybody should not be carrying a gun. And there are certain types of guns that should not be on the street. So, I mean, maybe we are agreeing
we
with each
do.
other to a certain
We
extent.
do.
I just think it's a little different, but yeah, that's my opinion. But I mean, I still believe that the gun can't do anything until somebody bothers it. Leave the gun alone, and it won't bother you, and it won't bother nobody else. But I'm obviously, if they put their hands on it, the gun and the bullet gonna do something.
Right. And the cigarette cannot give you lung cancer
If you
unless you
smoke it,
inhale
Unless you
that's right. Leave them cigarettes alone.
all right, all right. So listen, guys. There's someone asked a question,
Uh,
made a statement that led into a question that says that they think that officers should be evaluated by yearly due to the trauma that they are exposed to. And so, how does law enforcement oversee that in order to better support the community?
I think he froze.
Make sure that I steer us back because we're talking about youth and gun violence, and in talking about youth and gun violence, I want to make sure that in our conversation here, that I get to hear that the people get to hear from the both of you, very reputable, credible individuals, your ideas as far as a pathway to peace. What does that look like? So let's talk about this piece right here. The officers. And, that's important because of the relationships and because we talked about policing. That is an ingredient, but we don't want to just put everything on the law enforcement people. But we'll chat about this because it was brought to us. How does law enforcement oversee officers being exposed to trauma, being evaluated, this individual suggested bi-yearly in order to better support the community.
Well, I agree with that. I think we should be evaluated more regularly than just one time when you come into the police department because over a certain amount of years, you've seen a lot of things, you've been through a lot of things, and I'm not opposed to that at all. To be honest with you, our department doesn't do that. The only way they do it is if a supervisor or someone of higher rank sees an issue and they feel that it's necessary, and then they request that that person is evaluated, and that's how it normally is done. But I'm not opposed to that at all. I do know that over time and years of seeing different things, your mindset can be affected. I agree.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just shared with my daughter the other day. Just talking about being a pastor. I said I've been by bedsides to see people breathe their last breath. And so when you hear your dad talking about, I'm taking a moment, I'm taking a minute to just relax and have me time, you know, there's a lot that you see, and people sometimes don't understand, all that certain professions bring about and exposes you to, and they say, oh, the officer has on a uniform, and that's the end of it. But there's a whole lot more that officer has been exposed to, and try to bifurcate and try to be officer, be mom, you know, be wife or be husband or be father, and so it's a lot that goes into it. And so a very simple and supportive answer. Let me follow it up very briefly to say, how then, if that's not in place, how then the people in the community can request that can be something that is put in place.
Simple. We take it to the chief and we talk to the chief about it. It would be a union thing as well.
Okay.
We have unions, and obviously everybody would have to buy in. But that's where it starts. You talk to the chief about it, health services, and you hope that they will see it how you're seeing it, because it's not a discipline. I think that sometimes officers may look at it as if they're being disciplined, when in reality they could just need some counseling. It's not a discipline. And that's how we would have to sell that. It's not disciplining you. We're not trying to take away your livelihood. We just want to make sure you're okay because you've seen some things. Now, also when officers go through a traumatic incident, maybe a shooting or something like that, they also have the option to go and have counseling. But I think what the question was, that should be something that is a regular thing. And I don't think that is asking too much of us. We have a lot of power in our hands. I don't think that's asking too much.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jonathan, you wanted to add something onto that piece before we kind of start just talking more, talk about this pathway to peace.
Mhm. Yes, I like the ideas that Major Butler had. I think one of the ways we can address this is we can have a policy proposal where it becomes mandatory that they have this. But then again, if you change that, what else is going to change? Healthcare costs is going to go up because you're going to need to hire more mental health counselors in order to see these officers. And then are they files sealed, or is it going to be shared with the captains and the lieutenants, and then they know this information, and then who are going to be liable if they allow that person to go back into the streets once they find out that they're suffering from some type of post-traumatic stress disorder. So we always want to be careful and but measured and make sure we think things through.
Mhm.
The
That's
knee-jerk reaction is
Yeah, that's the other stuff that I was talking about. Thank
yes,
you.
yes.
But
So
no,
yeah, we always, whenever we want to change something, we have to always ask ourselves, what is the unintended consequences that will be result because of this?
Yeah.
see, Jonathan. So Jonathan is going through all this training. The average individual, Jonathan, has not been pushed and probed by a professor or by a particular discipline that said no, dig deeper. Don't just stop there. And so, it's individuals like yourself, it's individuals like Major Butler who have been trained and have been taught that can take, what the average person. We don't say the average person. I think the average person just means that you. I'm the average person in context of everything that Major Butler knows. I am the average person in the context of everything that Jonathan Spikes knows. So when you hear the statement, the average person, it's not demeaning nor is it disrespectful, but it is really acknowledging those who have the expertise in these particular areas. And so you begin to yield to their expertise and hear what they have to share and say when we make those type of requests. And it's a good request. It's a good request. Both of our panelists acknowledge it's a great request, but then okay, hey, let's dig a little bit deeper and let's look a little bit further, put teeth, organizing what would that look like as you take that proposal to the chiefs, whether it be with the city or any of our municipalities or county as it pertains to law enforcement. And so, listen, we got on this line. We talked about youth and violence, and we really wanted to start just talking about a pathway to peace. We want to drop some seeds into the ears, the minds, and the hearts of the persons who are viewing, whether it be on Facebook or on the webinar, YouTube or Twitter, or those who are at a later date in juncture come back and view this particular broadcast. We want to drop seeds in their minds and their hearts as it pertains to a pathway. So, Mr. Spikes, in your opinion, what is a pathway? What does that pathway look like, or how do we even get on it? I'll just put two questions together. What is it, and how do we even get on it? So, um, can you get? Listen, we're going to get on this yellow brick road of talking about pathway to peace, and then we're gonna pick up Major Butler, like with the whiz, and we're going to ease on down each road and talk about this pathway to peace. Mr. Spice, can you get us going in that area?
Yes, I didn't talk much about my background, but I am growing up in Scott Projects when I was, I think I was 6 or 7. My brother was like 13. We were playing in the house. My mom told my brother to go take out the trash. My brother went outside to take out the trash. He came back in the house with a bullet in his leg.
Mm.
Blood on the floor. The ambulance and the fire department and the police are in the middle of our house, and it was a lot to try to grasp and understand as a child. And when he survived, thank God. And when I became 21 years old, I had another brother who was shot and murdered on 68 Terrace and 18th Avenue. So my understanding of how this worked was first inspired by living through it, my lived experience. And then I became a mental health counselor to help other people understand how this work, how post-traumatic stress disorder do affect you when you see these things, either witnessing it and going through it. And even when they bring the stories back to the school, it is also further enhanced by further education that I'm receiving now. So when we say what works, it depends on the individual because we cannot, it's not a one way approach to anything in life because we have number one, biology and DNA plays an effect on how you respond to situations. Then we look at the shared environment where we live, where we play, and the unshared environments, things that more people may have exposure to upper income areas than others. So all of these factors come into a play when we say, how do you solve it? So the first thing we do is we listen to the person who's experiencing it. Because always the person who's experiencing it the most are the ones who have the solutions.
Mm.
So we call that compassionate curiosity. Sitting down like we're doing now, Pastor Bob, we spoke about this already. We go to a certain community right now twice a month, and we just listen to what the people are saying. And based upon what they're saying, we try to solve their issue in the now. So they could tell us a whole bunch of things, but we ask, well, what can I solve today to make your life better? And they can either come up with a solution or sometimes they don't know what that is. And so then that gives them some homework to come up with. They have to tell us what they need instead of us telling them what they need. The main purpose of us doing that is sometimes we can help them see what they don't see, but we're not there to be prescriptive because people know what they need and they also know what they don't need. And that's the main point of coming up with solutions. So the person has to take charge of that. And I think Major Butler, you also mentioned a piece of that the people have to want it. Sometimes they don't know they want it, or it's sometimes scary to change the things that you are accustomed to doing. It takes work. It takes time. You may fail at it a couple of times, but you can still do it at your own pace. Compassionate curiosity is the most important thing when we're trying to come up with solutions. It's the person that drives the change, not us. We're there to support them through driving their own change with resources and education and services and all of the other things that we already mentioned today.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Major Butler. Um, what is that pathway?
Well, I agree with Mr. Spikes. I mean, at the end of the day, the people have to want it. And I think that us as leaders, it's our job to help them understand why they need it and to talk to them, encourage them, listen, because they do know what they want. That's one of the things that we do a lot in the community now when we go out and just walking, when I'm talking and dealing with people. I like to listen. You know, what can we do? What can we do better? You tell me. What is it that I'm not seeing or understanding? Because you sleep here in this area every night. I'm not here all night. You gotta listen. You have to listen. I totally agree with that. And once they understand what they need, it's up to us to help them and guide them towards the right resources. It can be done. I think it goes back to my first statements, my earlier statements about consistency, because I have noticed in my pathway of my career that people come in with all these ideas, they come to the people for a little while, and then they gone. Consistency. I think it's not good to do that to people. It's almost like promising them something and then you never follow through with it. We have to be consistent with our compassion, consistent with making sure that we are there with the right resources. Because I agree with Miss Sykes. I agree with it. It's they once they show that they want it, we need to cultivate it.
Mhm.
We need to cultivate it.
I
And
would,
people want help. People don't want to be. I think there's more people that want to be in a good environment than bad.
oh,
Yeah, there's more people. We have to look at it like that. That there's more children out there that we can save if we can help them understand how to get out of the situation.
absolutely, absolutely. I was shared on yesterday evening as we were out in the community with law enforcement in the South Dade area, and that whole piece is ironic. That whole piece about listening to what they have to say, not me telling them, but listening to what they have to say. Take notes, take heed to what's being stated, and sometimes they may be all over the place, but listen to what they have to say. And then once you listen, maybe you can help with your expertise to help organize their thoughts, and then say, okay, now if I'm hearing you correctly, you stated this, or whatever the case may be, and then start crafting, you know, crafting the plan. But it's based upon what they say. Listen, there was one more question on Facebook. I want to address that. I could sit, you guys are my people, and we can continue to talk. But I want to make sure that the people are hungry and thirsty to come back next Thursday. So listen, there was a question. I believe this is Pastor West. Thank you, Pastor West, for tuning in. And he asked the question: what type of training does do inner city officers receive, and what is being done to accomplish the goal of trust in these communities? And so, Major Butler, it sounds like they want to hear from you.
Well, thank you, sir. So we have a lot of training for our officers. We don't differentiate between inner city or not inner city because an officer can be placed in any part of the city. And so we train them all. Okay. Detectives, patrolmen, we train them all. And as a matter of fact, we do cultural diversity, we do ethics training. We actually just added another component. You alluded to it earlier, Pastor, about sensitivity training. We have recently partnered with the Miami Heat, and they have a facilitator that comes down every month, and we do at least two or three. We do 3 sessions for maybe a couple of weeks in that month, where we have officers come in, and it's called Dedication to Community, by the way. That's the name of the company and the facilitator that comes down. And they come in, they help us talk through. We bring in community leaders, regular citizens that are able to come in to dialogue with the officers and help the officers understand the role of the people and what the people need from them when they respond to whatever the situation is. Because we know as officers, when people call the police, they're not calling us to come to their birthday party unless it's a problem at the birthday party. Okay. So when we get calls, things are already a mess. And so sometimes I say, man, I should have been a firefighter. They get all the good stuff, but no, I wouldn't have been happy because I'm very happy. I'm very happy in my career. But sometimes they get all the life saving stuff. And we save lives too. We wear a lot of hats. But most of the time when people call us, it's because something is going awry. And when we train them, we have these people come in, they create an atmosphere that people can be open and honest and dialogue, because everything starts with conversation. We have a very young police department, very, very young. If you notice, most of the officers throughout Miami-Dade County, they're young. And so they haven't gone through anything. They can arrive at a scene where you have a domestic and none of them have ever been married. They still live at home with mama and daddy. And they like, what y'all fussing for? Like, dude, you just gotta leave. And this guy, like, wait a minute, this is my house. No, I'm because I told you to. You got to talk to me and you got to let them know why they got to leave and how this is gonna go. You can't just do that, you know. But because they haven't experienced anything, they don't know. They don't know that if a detective calls a parent that has been a victim and their child has been taken, that they need to call them back in a timely manner because that person just wants hope. They just want to be able to say, I know my detective is still looking for the killer of my child. Even if you have no information for them, you need to respond. So we try to teach those compassionate things to build the trust. We go out in the community. We have those kickball games that I believe one of you alluded to earlier and talked about. We go out there, we do that. We have an ice cream truck. We go around to the schools and we do the officer friendly. We do it. Now, I would say we could do a better job at marketing when we do it.
Right.
Because sometimes people don't know that we're doing it.
Right.
So we can do a better job at that. And I think that we're getting there now. We've become very prominent on social media. We have a very good following now in the city of Miami. And so we try to utilize that to our advantage. But we are constantly, he asked about trust. Trust is something that we are constantly working on. It doesn't come to an end. We don't just get to where everybody just trusts us. That doesn't happen. Because it only takes one officer to do something really, really, really bad. And it has set us back to whenever. It's like we start all over again. So trust building is an ongoing process for that particular piece. And we constantly have training. We constantly deal with our ethics and talking to our officers about sensitivity and trying to help them understand why we need to be in the community, why we need to be more than just law enforcers, why we actually need to protect but serve most of all, because police work is a service. We are serving people in the community, and we try to make sure that service is always in the forefront of everything.
Right. So I hope that helps out the person that asked the question. I want to try and move us to where we can get final takes here tonight. Um, I mean, there's a mouthful and really a mountain worth of things that we could share and our panelists can share here on tonight. But again, I don't want us to be here all night long. I want to see you guys back again at our next University Talks. And so some takeaways, Mr. Spikes will come to you, and then Major Butler will come back to you. And then we'll bring our third Thursday Talks here tonight to a close because, while we spent 2 months, last month and this month, talking about this particular topic, it's something that I believe the conversation doesn't need to end. I have noticed that um, current human nature um, bores quickly and easily on a topic and on an item, even when there's not a resolution, even when it requires more work. And so people, us talking tonight may not be as exciting if it were in comparison if we were following right behind an unfortunate shooting incident. Um, we become numb, we become disinterested, and we move on like the news to the next hot topic. But that's never ever going to resolve the ills that constantly plague our people and plague our city. So, Mr. Spikes, some final takeaways, Major Butler, some final takeaways because we see the city every day. Some people don't see the city every day. We deal with the people in the city every day. And so for us, it's not a hot topic. For us, it's an everyday topic. Everyday topic. And so let's hear from you, Mr. Spikes, and then and Major Butler.
I like the previous statements that Major Butler made. I will say I was wondering with the questioner, was it trust or connectivity? Connection, feeling the connection with the police, because if we feel a connection, then we feel safe. And that may be a little bit different than or we don't know what the definition of trust is, because it depends on the situation. But one thing I will say, for us, it takes a community coming together, people with different experts and community members themselves. Because as I said before, they most likely have the solution to the problem. And unless we include them into these conversations, then we're just spinning our wheels and we may create things that they're not going to use or they don't need. So I appreciate the fact that City of Miami Police Department is part of the community collaborative that we do. They show up every single month. And we have these same discussions that we're having now. And it does show, like you said, Major Butler, that you all are very in tune to changing the narrative on what policing is and showing a heartfelt concern for the community by checking in with them and also checking in with yourselves. One of the great things I heard today was that there's a possible policy that we can embark upon once we continue to flesh it out, go through an iterative process. And that is the one about officers, maybe mandatory or not, getting checkups. How are you doing? Because they do see a lot, they do witness a lot, and they have to hold a lot of their stuff in and maintain and control their emotions. That's the same thing we want the people in the community to do. Those who witness shootings, see a lot of trauma, it affects them too. It affects them in their education. It affects them in their homes. It affects them when you say hello, they ignore you, or they bark at you if you see, how you doing today? Why you want to know how I'm doing? So all of these things, we're all human, and we're doing the best that we can. But as long as we remain open to do even more than the best that we can, then that is the solution.
Awesome, awesome. Major Butler, I want you to chime in because we got to get you out of your uniform so you can, take off the cape. And you got to get Mr. Spikes so he can get some rest and deal with the young people in our community on tomorrow. So, Major Butler, can you share some final takeaways here on tonight?
Well, I believe, first of all, thank you for this opportunity, for this platform to even be able to get a message out. This is a part of the first step. Let me say that. We got to talk. We got to make some decisions going forward. I believe regulation is important. I believe some things need to be regulated, policies need to be in place, people have to be held accountable. Accountability is extremely important once things are in place. If you got them in place and nobody's being held accountable, then we just made a piece of paper with a bunch of letters all over it. So for me, that's very important. And then most of all, and I said this starting out, is consistency. Mr. Spikes brought up, like we have something that we can embark on already just to help in another area. Don't let this be the last time that it spoke about. It came up. It's a great idea that to explore and see what avenues can be taken because everyone can use help. And he is a mental health professional. He knows people come with things that you have no idea. I tell people all the time, pastors, they need to hire some mental health people to be in the church and not try to counsel everybody because everybody don't just need pastors talking to. They need some professionals getting a doctorate degree, right? So I'm just keeping it real, So so I totally agree with that, and those are my main points. We gotta get some regulations in place, like those the gun violence. I know about GBI and things like that. We need regulations in place. We need policies, and we once those are in place, we need to hold people accountable, hold them accountable, and stay consistent with the things that we talk about. And lastly, we do have to have other people at the table in order to come up with a solution,
Absolutely.
especially the people that it's going to affect. That's
Absolutely.
all. Thank you again, Pastor. Thank you, Mr. Spikes. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, Major, we must have lunch.
I enjoyed you thoroughly.
Yes, me likewise.
I want to take this opportunity to thank both of our panelists, they took time out of their personal schedules and professional schedules to come and to just to share here on tonight. And to those that logged on to the webinar, and for those on Twitter Live and Facebook Live and YouTube Live, we thank each and every one of you. I encourage you, those that caught this broadcast on tonight live, listen, share it with your friends. Tell them to go back, listen to it, because it may birth some ideas in them that they may embark upon to help our communities, our people get on that pathway to peace. And so I want to encourage my brother, I want to encourage my sister to keep on laboring because your labor, it is not in vain. It is not in vain. And so thank you all tonight. I know we went a little long, but listen, this is a very, very worthwhile topic that has to continue to be talked about, and ideas are fleshed out and birthed out of these conversations that we can implement and transform our communities, transform the people in the communities, and just see a better and brighter inner city, a better and brighter people. So listen, thank you all. Listen, I love you all in Jesus. Good night, everyone.